My name is Clara Morgan, and for most of my 34 years, I have been the steady one, the quiet river that carves its path through stone not with force, but with persistence. I am a data scientist, a woman who finds comfort in patterns and solace in the elegant logic of numbers. My life, much like my work, has been built on a foundation of careful planning, quiet diligence, and a deep-seated belief that responsibility is not a burden, but a form of love. It was this belief that led me, 3 weeks before my sister's wedding, to a place of such profound heartbreak that the very bedrock of my world fractured, leaving me to rebuild myself from the ground up. I grew up in a small, quiet suburb of Denver, in a house filled with the scent of old books and my mother's rosewater perfume. Our home was a sanctuary of soft-spoken words and predictable routines. My mother, Susan, was a librarian, a woman whose love was expressed in perfectly mended socks and cups of chamomile tea left on our nightstands. My father, David, taught history at the local high school, a gentle man who saw the grand narrative of the past in the everyday lives of his family. We were a family of 4, but from the beginning, it felt as if we orbited 2 different suns. I was the elder, the one my parents referred to as their steady oak. I did my homework without being asked, started a savings account with my first babysitting money, and learned to read the quiet anxieties in my parents' faces. "Clara will handle it," became the family mantra, a phrase that was both a compliment and a cage. My sister, Sophie, 2 years my junior, was the wildflower. Where I was predictable, she was spontaneous. Where I was reserved, she was effervescent. She was beautiful, charming, and possessed a talent for making people want to take care of her. My parents, enchanted by her unpredictable bloom, nurtured this quality. Her missteps were learning experiences, her whims were creative expressions. While I navigated the complex labyrinth of college applications and scholarship forms alone, my parents spent weeks helping Sophie choose the perfect theme for her prom. I didn't resent her for it then. It was simply the ecosystem of our family, the natural order of things. My path led me to Boulder, to the university, and to a fascination with the stories that data could tell. I thrived in the crisp mountain air, liberated by the anonymity of a world that judged me on the quality of my work, not my role within my family. I graduated with honors and joined a small environmental tech firm, a place where my analytical skills could contribute to something I believed in, the preservation of the wild, beautiful places that had become my sanctuary. My career flourished not through a single, spectacular event, but through the same steady persistence that defined my character. I lived modestly, investing my salary with the same careful consideration I applied to my code. Over a decade, those investments grew, quietly and consistently, until I found myself, at 33, in a position of unexpected financial security. It wasn't a dramatic windfall, but a gentle accumulation, the quiet reward for a life of prudence. Success didn't change my lifestyle, but it profoundly altered my role within my family. I was no longer just the steady oak. I was the forest, a source of endless resources. It began subtly. Dad's old sedan finally gave up, and I helped with a down payment on a new one. Mom's library faced budget cuts, reducing her hours, and I quietly covered their mortgage for a few months. Sophie, after a string of short-lived jobs and artistic endeavors, needed help with rent between apartments. Each time, I gave freely, telling myself it was what families did. The gratitude was always there, but it was tinged with an unspoken expectation, the easy acceptance of someone long accustomed to being cared for. When Sophie met Julian, it felt like the culmination of her life's narrative. He was a wealth manager from a family whose roots in Colorado were as deep and established as the mountains themselves. They had a sprawling ranch near Aspen and a name that opened doors. Sophie was swept into a world of charity galas, ski weekends, and effortless luxury. The wildflower had found her perfect, manicured garden, and my parents were ecstatic. The engagement was announced after a whirlwind 10-month romance. Sophie called me, her voice shimmering with joy, describing a flawless proposal under a canopy of stars at a mountain overlook. I was genuinely happy for her, though a small, disquieting part of me noticed that Julian seemed more captivated by the polished, effervescent version of Sophie she presented to the world than the complex, sometimes lost girl I knew. "Clara, I can't imagine doing this without you," she'd said. "You've always been my rock. I want you by my side for every single step." The first tremor of unease came when she named the venue, the Aspenwood Manor, a historic and breathtakingly expensive estate nestled in a valley of aspen groves. A wedding there was the stuff of magazine spreads, with a price tag to match. "Don't you worry about Mom and Dad," Sophie had assured me when I gently questioned the cost. "Julian's parents are being wonderfully generous, and we have it all under control." She paused, her voice softening to a conspiratorial whisper. "Of course, if you wanted to help with a few of the personal touches, to make it truly ours, that would mean the world to me." "Of course," I said, imagining I was contributing to her dress or the rehearsal dinner flowers. "I'd love to help." I had no inkling then that a few personal touches would soon become the entire financial scaffolding of her dream wedding. I didn't know that my love, expressed through the responsibility I had always carried, would be the very thing used to justify my eventual, brutal exclusion. The gentle stream of requests soon became a torrent. 2 weeks after the engagement, Sophie invited me for tea at a charming but pricey cafe in Boulder. Over lavender scones and artisanal tea for which I paid, she slid a leather-bound wedding planner across the table. It was filled with magazine clippings, fabric swatches, and a meticulously detailed budget that made my breath catch. The bottom line was a staggering $80,000. "Sophie, this is a lot," I managed, my voice quieter than I intended. "It's actually quite standard for a wedding at the manor," she said, her tone breezy, as if discussing the weather. "The venue and catering alone are $30,000, and that's for their most basic package. We want the fairy tale, Clara. The one we used to dream about." I asked the question that had been hovering in the air. "What are Julian's parents contributing?" Sophie's bright smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Well, that's the thing. They're a bit traditional. They think we're rushing, and they've suggested we wait another year. They offered to pay for a beautiful, small wedding, but," she trailed off, gesturing to the elaborate planner, "this is the vision. They said they might help more closer to the date, once they see how committed we are." She looked at me, her large, expressive eyes beginning to well with tears. "And Mom and Dad, you know they'd give us the world if they could, but they've scraped together $5,000, and that's their life savings. Clara, I know it's an immense thing to ask, but this is my one day. My only day. Julian's world is so different from ours, and I want to start our life together on an equal footing, to show his family that we can create something beautiful on our own." I should have said no. I should have suggested a more sensible plan, a longer engagement, a budget that didn't rely on my life savings. But looking at my sister's tear-streaked face, hearing the tremor of insecurity in her voice, the old, ingrained pattern took over. "Clara will handle it. I can cover the deposit for the manor," I heard myself say. "That will secure the date, and you can figure out the rest." The tears vanished as if by magic, replaced by a smile of dazzling relief. "Oh, Clara, thank you. You are the best sister in the entire world. I knew I could count on you." That $30,000 deposit, covering the venue, catering, and the photographer she simply had to have, was the first major erosion of my financial and emotional boundaries. In the months that followed, the requests continued, each framed as a small, unforeseen crisis that only I could solve. "The floral designer needs a 50% deposit by Friday, or we lose her, and she's the only one who understands my vision for the centerpieces. The custom-designed dress I fell in love with is a limited edition, and they need full payment to reserve it. The string quartet Julian's mother mentioned just had a cancellation on our date, but we have to book them now." With each transfer of funds, I told myself it was an investment in my sister's happiness. I created spreadsheets, my default comfort in times of chaos, tracking every expense with a naive belief that this was a loan, a temporary measure until Julian's parents warmed up, or Sophie and Julian themselves started contributing. By the time the wedding was 3 months away, my contribution had surpassed $60,000. My financial advisor, a kind and pragmatic woman, had shifted from gentle suggestions to direct, concerned emails. My parents, far from being a voice of reason, seemed to cheerlead the extravagance from the sidelines. "You are so fortunate to be able to give your sister the wedding she deserves," my mother said during one phone call. "Your father and I always felt we fell short with her." The unspoken message was clear: my success was not my own, but a resource to compensate for their perceived parental failings. Sophie's attitude, meanwhile, underwent a subtle but chilling transformation. Gratitude slowly curdled into entitlement. "Thank you so much for helping," became, "We need another $2,000 for the upgraded lighting package," delivered with the casual expectation of a queen addressing her court. Julian, the man from the world of means, was a ghost in all financial conversations. One evening, after I'd transferred another $5,000 for a premium open bar and late-night taco truck, a non-negotiable for Julian's friends, I gently pressed Sophie on the matter. "Julian is contributing in other ways," she said, a defensive edge to her voice. "He's handling the entire honeymoon. It's his gift to me." I later discovered, through an accidentally forwarded email chain, that the 2-week, all-inclusive honeymoon to a luxury resort in Fiji was, in fact, a gift from his parents. Julian wasn't contributing a single dollar to the wedding or the honeymoon. As the day drew nearer, my role shifted from generous benefactor to inconvenient appendage. My demanding job meant I couldn't attend every vendor meeting, but I made an effort to be present for the important ones, rearranging my schedule or joining via video call. Increasingly, however, Sophie seemed to schedule these meetings at the precise times she knew I was unavailable. "Oh, was your big presentation today?" "I'm so sorry, the time must have slipped my mind." "It's okay, we went ahead and put the deposit down." The calligrapher was just perfect. The illusion of my involvement shattered completely one Tuesday evening. I had managed to leave a project early to surprise Sophie at the menu tasting at the Manor, an event I had been repeatedly told was fully booked. I walked into the private dining room to find Sophie, our mother, and Julian's mother, Victoria, a woman as polished and formidable as the mountain peaks outside, laughing over glasses of champagne. "Clara!" Sophie's exclamation was one of shock, not pleasure. "What are you doing here?" "My meeting ended early. I thought I'd join you," I said, the words feeling heavy in the suddenly quiet room. Victoria gave me a slow, assessing look, her eyes scanning my simple work dress with faint disapproval. "Sophie didn't mention you were coming," she said, her voice smooth as ice. "It was a last-minute surprise," I replied, extending a hand that she barely grazed with her fingertips. "It's lovely to finally meet you in person, Victoria. I'm Clara, Sophie's sister." "Yes," she said. "The one in technology." Throughout the tasting, I was treated not as the financial pillar of the event, but as an awkward interloper. Victoria held court, dismissing the chef's suggestions as uninspired and pushing for expensive additions, truffle-infused everything, a raw bar that I knew would find their way onto my invoice. Sophie, eager to please her future mother-in-law, agreed with every suggestion, while our own mother nodded along, beaming as if she were watching a foreign film she didn't understand but found captivating. I tried to offer a practical opinion once, suggesting that a raw bar might be risky for a summer outdoor wedding, and was met with a condescending smile from Victoria and a sharp kick from Sophie under the table. After Victoria departed, leaving a trail of expensive perfume in her wake, I pulled Sophie aside. "What was that, Sophie?" I felt like I was crashing my own party. "Don't be so dramatic, Clara," she sighed, rubbing her temples. "Victoria has impeccable taste, and it's important that she feels included. Her approval means a lot to Julian." "More than my opinion?" The person actually paying for all of this? The question slipped out, sharper than I intended. Sophie's face hardened. Is that what this is about? The money? Are you going to hold that over my head for the rest of my life? I thought this was a gift. Before I could respond, our mother intervened, her voice fluttering with anxiety. Girls, please. Sophie is under so much stress. Clara, darling, let's not add to it. As always, I was the one to apologize, to smooth the ruffled feathers. But a seed of deep resentment had been planted. A week later, that seed was watered. While waiting for a friend at a coffee shop near Sophie's apartment, I heard her unmistakable laugh from a nearby booth. She was with her maid of honor, Olivia. Clara is being such a micromanager, Sophie was complaining, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet cafe. Honestly, it's like just because she's writing the checks, she thinks she gets a vote on the font for the place cards. It's my day, not her financial portfolio showcase. Ugh, that's so annoying, Olivia sympathized. But hey, at least you're getting the dream wedding without the debt. I guess her attitude is the price of admission. Sophie sighed dramatically. Sometimes I just wish she would transfer the money and stay out of it. All her questions and spreadsheets are making this so much more stressful than it needs to be. I slipped out of the cafe before they could see me, my coffee untouched, the words a bitter acid in my stomach. The spreadsheets she mocked were my way of trying to keep her dream organized, a gift of my time and skills on top of my money. The final, brutal blow before the uninvitation came with the rehearsal dinner. Hosted and paid for by Julian's parents at their exclusive country club, it was my first real immersion into their world. The air was thick with old money and casual condescension. Julian's friends, all in finance and law, made veiled jokes about the tech bubble and people who got lucky with code. More disturbing was Sophie's transformation. Gone was the free-spirited girl who once wanted to teach art to children. In her place was a polished stranger who spoke of her lifestyle brand consultancy, a grandiose term for her modestly successful Instagram account, and laughed at jokes that I knew, in her heart, she would find cruel. When one of Julian's uncles asked how our family was managing such a lavish wedding on a teacher's and a librarian's salary, Sophie answered smoothly, "Oh, Clara and I have both been very fortunate in our careers. We decided to pool our resources to create something truly special." She made us sound like equal partners. Later, I overheard Victoria telling another guest, Sophie comes from a very sweet, simple family. Her sister did quite well for herself in that tech boom, nothing generational, of course, but she's comfortable. I felt a wave of nausea. She wasn't just taking my money, she was minimizing my life's work, repackaging my success into a more palatable, less threatening version for her new family. When I tried to talk to her about it later, she was dismissive. "I was just trying to make us sound good, Clara. Can't you see that? It would be humiliating to tell them my sister is bankrolling the whole thing." I went home that night with a cold dread settling in my bones. I was in too deep. The wedding was just weeks away. All I had to do was get through it, smile, and then I promised myself I would begin the difficult work of building boundaries. I had no idea that the choice would soon be taken from me. The text message arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, during a critical presentation. As the lead on a new predictive modeling project, I was walking our executive team through my findings when my phone, lying face down on the conference table, began to vibrate insistently. A single buzz I would have ignored, but the relentless, repeated pulses signaled an urgency I couldn't dismiss. "Excuse me for one moment," I murmured, stepping into the hallway. My screen was lit up with a series of texts from my mother. "Clara, darling, we need to talk. There's been a change of plans regarding the wedding. You're not invited. Sophie doesn't want you there." The polished concrete floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I leaned against the cool glass wall, rereading the words. They were stark, clinical, devoid of the soft-spoken warmth my mother usually employed. A follow-up message appeared before I could process the first three. "Sophie feels your presence has become a source of stress and negativity. She's worried you'll make a scene. Julian's parents have offered to contribute financially, but only if the day can be guaranteed to be free of family drama. The final message was the cruelest. Please try to understand. This is the most important day of her life, and she needs it to be perfect. Respect her wishes. Respect her wishes. The phrase echoed in the sudden, roaring silence of my mind. Respect the wishes of the sister for whom I had liquidated investments, incurred tax penalties, and poured nearly $75,000 into her perfect day? The rage that rose in me was a white-hot, purifying fire. I called my mother, my hand shaking so violently I could barely press the screen. "Explain this to me," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Clara, I know this is a shock," she began, her voice already taking on the placating tone I had come to despise. "But Sophie is simply overwhelmed. Victoria has been expressing concerns about the tension between you two. The tension I feel when I'm being used as a walking ATM? That tension." "Don't be crude, darling," she chided. "This isn't about the money. It's about creating a peaceful, happy atmosphere for Sophie and Julian." "So I'm the disruption?" The storm cloud in her perfect sky. There was a long, damning pause. "Victoria and Julian's father spoke with Sophie yesterday. They're willing to contribute $25,000 to the costs, but they were very clear. They were concerned about what they called family instability. Apparently, Sophie confided in them that you've been struggling." "Struggling?" I repeated, the word tasting like poison. My mother's voice dropped to a near whisper. "She may have implied that the pressure of your career has taken a toll on your mental health. That you've become erratic." The hallway began to spin. My sister had not just used me. She had not just excluded me. She had methodically and maliciously painted me as mentally unstable to her new family, a convenient narrative to explain away the inconvenience of my presence. She had taken my greatest strengths, my competence, my diligence, my success, and twisted them into a pathology. "And you?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Did you defend me, Mom? Did you tell them the truth?" "Clara, you have to understand the position she was in. This marriage is everything to her. Julian's family values appearances above all else." "And what about truth? What about decency? What about the sister who has done nothing but support her?" "Of course we value those things," she insisted, her voice gaining a frantic edge. "Once the wedding is over and the pressure is off, we can all sit down and work through this. She'll make it up to you." In that moment, a profound and devastating clarity descended upon me. The steady oak, the family fixer, the quiet river, these were just prettier names for the role I truly played. The resource. The utility. And my utility had just expired. "Mom," I said, and the calm in my voice was so absolute it frightened even me. "Please relay a message to Sophie for me. If I am not welcome at her wedding, then neither is my funding." "Clara, don't be vindictive. You can't do that." "I'm not being vindictive. I am aligning my financial support with my personal invitation. The two are now linked." My voice grew stronger, each word a stone being laid in a new foundation. "If Julian's parents are so concerned with a drama-free day that they're willing to pay $25,000 for my absence, they can surely cover the rest of the $75,000 I've already spent. But the contracts are signed. The deposits are paid. The wedding is in 4 days." "Actually," I said, a grim satisfaction rising within me, "I've read every one of those contracts. Most have cancellation clauses. I should know. I'm the one who negotiated them." I ended the call before she could reply. I stood in the hallway for another minute, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my mind was a place of serene, cold resolve. I walked back into the conference room, apologized for the interruption, and finished my presentation with flawless, mechanical precision. My colleagues saw only a consummate professional. They could not see the woman inside who was simultaneously being shattered and forged anew in the same fire. That evening I did not grieve. Grieving would come later. That evening I acted. I spread the contents of the leather-bound wedding planner and my own meticulous spreadsheets across my dining room table. It was a map of my generosity, and now it would be my guide for a systematic, controlled demolition. I am not, by nature, a destructive person. But the betrayal had been so complete, so calculated, that my response had to be equally absolute. This was not about revenge. It was about reclaiming my agency. It was about consequences. I started with the Aspenwood Manor. I called the event coordinator, a pleasant woman named Sarah with whom I'd spent hours discussing linen colors and contingency plans for rain. Clara. Just the person I was hoping to hear from. We need to finalize the seating chart by tomorrow, she said cheerfully. Actually, Sarah, I said, my voice even. I'm calling to cancel the event. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. Cancel? Clara, is everything all right? I took a breath. No, it isn't. I have been funding this wedding for my sister. I have just been informed that I am no longer invited to attend. Under the circumstances, my financial support is withdrawn. To her immense credit, Sarah's response was one of pure professionalism and quiet empathy. I am so sorry to hear that. That is an incredibly difficult situation. She walked me through the cancellation policy. Because we were more than 72 hours out, I would be able to recoup 40% of my deposit. Please process the cancellation and the refund to my account, I instructed. If the bride or her fiancé contact you, you are welcome to offer them the date, provided they can produce the full payment immediately. One by one, I worked my way down the list. The caterer, the floral designer, the photographer, the string quartet, the calligrapher, the vintage car rental. Each conversation was a variation on the same theme. Some were awkwardly sympathetic. Word travels fast in the tight-knit wedding community, and by my fourth call, the photographer's first words were, I heard what happened. Good for you. That's monstrous. A few vendors, citing extraordinary circumstances, offered me more generous refunds than their contracts stipulated. With each call, I felt a weight lifting. I was not just canceling a party, I was dismantling the structure of my own exploitation. The money I was losing, and there was still a significant amount that was non-refundable, felt like a severance payment for a job I never should have accepted, the job of being my family's safety net. The last step was digital. I logged into the bespoke wedding website I had spent weeks building for Sophie and Julian, with its photo galleries, registry links, and travel information for guests. I downloaded a single copy of everything for my records. Then I permanently deleted the entire site. I deleted the shared cloud folders filled with timelines, contact sheets, and seating charts. I erased every digital trace of my labor. Just as I clicked the final delete button, my phone, which had been buzzing with ignored calls from my parents, rang with Sophie's name. This time, I answered. What have you done? She shrieked, her voice raw with panic and fury. The manor just called me. They said you canceled everything. My wedding is gone. No, Sophie, I said, the calm in my voice a stark contrast to her hysteria. My wedding is gone. The one I was paying for. The one you uninvited me from. What you're left with is your problem to solve. You are a vindictive, jealous monster, she sobbed. You couldn't stand to see me happy, so you had to ruin it. Mom was right, you're having a complete breakdown. On the contrary, I replied, feeling a strange sense of detachment. I'm having a breakthrough. For the first time, I am seeing you and Mom and Dad with perfect clarity. Julian's parents are going to think we're white trash. How could you humiliate me like this? You could try telling them the truth, I suggested. That might be a novel approach for you. Tell them you lied about my mental state to get me uninvited from an event I was funding. See how that plays out in their world of appearances. I hate you, she screamed, the sound cracking. This isn't over. She hung up. Within minutes, a text from my father came through. Your mother is distraught. I hope you're satisfied. We will be seeking legal counsel. I laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. I typed a single reply to the family group chat. Then you can pay the legal fees yourselves. I'm done. Then I blocked all of their numbers. I poured myself a glass of wine, the first I'd had in weeks that wasn't accompanied by a side of anxiety. I opened my laptop and, instead of spreadsheets and vendor sites, I began researching cabins in the San Juan Mountains, places with no cell service and no Wi-Fi. I needed to go somewhere the silence was absolute, where the only patterns I had to analyze were the constellations in the clear mountain sky. I felt hollowed out, scoured clean, but also strangely, powerfully free. The family I had loved and served was an illusion. And, for the first time in my life, I was putting the real, tangible person myself first. The week I spent in the San Juan Mountains was a study in silence and expanse. The cabin was nestled in a valley, where the only sounds were the wind moving through the pines and the distant cry of a hawk. It was there, in the absence of digital noise and familial obligation, that the grieving finally began. It came in waves, a deep, shuddering sorrow for the loss of the sister I thought I had, for the parents I believed had loved me unconditionally. I filled a journal with pages of raw, tangled thoughts, tracing the patterns of my life back to their origins. I saw how my identity had become inextricably linked with my utility. I wasn't Clara. I was Clara who fixes things. Without a problem to solve, who was I? The question was terrifying and, at the same time, exhilarating. On the Saturday that would have been Sophie's wedding day, I hiked to a high alpine lake, its water a startling, glacial blue. I wrote down every hurtful word, every casual dismissal, every moment of being taken for granted on slips of paper. I folded them into tiny boats and, one by one, set them adrift on the icy water, watching until the wind and waves consumed them. It was a small, private ceremony of release. Returning to Boulder was a re-entry into a world that had moved on, but not without leaving ripples. Sophie and Julian had, I learned through a sympathetic cousin, Ethan, managed to pull together a wedding. It had been a hastily arranged affair at Julian's parents' country club, a shadow of the grand event Sophie had envisioned. The guest list was slashed, the fairy tale details replaced by standard club fare. The narrative my cousin Ethan told me was that I had suffered a sudden and serious health crisis and that the family was rallying in the face of tragedy. I had been erased and rewritten as a victim, a more palatable role than that of a woman who had simply said no more. I didn't correct the narrative. The people who mattered my small, steadfast circle of friends knew the truth and surrounded me with a quiet, fierce loyalty. The rest didn't deserve an explanation. The months that followed were a period of careful reconstruction. I found a therapist, a wise woman named Dr. Chin, who gave me the language for the dynamics I had only ever felt. She called it parentification and enmeshment, and naming it felt like turning on a light in a dark room. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out, she told me. They are gates. You get to decide who comes in and when. My mother was the first to approach my new gate. After months of unanswered texts, I agreed to meet her for coffee. She looked tired, the lines around her eyes deeper than I remembered. For the first time, we had a real conversation. She cried, apologizing not just for the wedding, but for the lifetime of expectation she and my father had placed on my shoulders. It wasn't a perfect apology, it was threaded with justifications and self-pity, but it was a start. My relationship with my father remained more fraught. He wanted to pretend nothing had happened, to paper over the chasm with pleasantries. I refused, and our interactions became stilted, polite, and infrequent. I was learning to accept that some people may never be capable of the change you need from them. As for Sophie, I heard through the family grapevine that her marriage was already showing cracks. The polished world she had so desperately wanted to enter was proving to be cold and unforgiving. Julian's family treated her like a pretty ornament, and the reality of being a wealth manager's wife involved a great deal of lonely performance. Then, almost a year to the day after I had canceled her wedding, a letter arrived. The handwriting on the pale gray envelope was unmistakably Sophie's. I held it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "I was a coward and a thief," it read. "I stole your money, your time, and your trust. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, and I don't deserve it if you can't. But I need you to know that I am sorry. I am getting help. I am trying to become a person who is worthy of a sister like you." The final break came 2 months later. I received a short, tearful call from my mother. Sophie and Julian were getting a divorce. The idyllic life had imploded under the weight of unrealistic expectations and a foundation built on lies. Sophie, my mother said, was moving back to Denver. She had enrolled in a program to get her teaching certificate. I didn't feel triumph, only a deep, weary sadness for all the wreckage. Another 6 months passed. I was seeing someone, a kind architect named Mark, who loved the mountains as much as I did. When I told him the story, he didn't see me as vindictive or dramatic. He saw me as strong. "They were lucky you put up with it for as long as you did," he said, and in his eyes, I saw my own worth reflected back at me. One sunny afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "It's Sophie. I know I have no right to ask, but I'm in Boulder for the day for a university interview. I was wondering if I could buy you a coffee. If not, I completely understand." We met at a small, neutral cafe. The woman who walked in was not the dazzling, entitled bride I remembered. She was quieter, her eyes holding a new depth. She told me about her therapy, about the painful process of dismantling the princess identity she had hidden behind for so long. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She simply took full, unvarnished responsibility for her actions. I didn't offer a miraculous reconciliation. Too much had been broken. But as we sat there, talking about her dream of teaching art and my work with environmental data, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years, a tentative, fragile hope. "I appreciate the apology, Sophie," I said as we parted ways. "And I'm open to seeing where this goes." Slowly, our relationship is not what it was. The easy intimacy of our shared childhood is gone, perhaps forever. In its place, we are building something new, something more honest and intentional. It is a slow, careful process, like tending to a sapling in a place that has known wildfire. I don't know if the steady oak and the wildflower can ever truly grow side by side again. But for the first time, we are both planting our roots in the same solid ground of truth. And for now, that is enough.